On June 11th, 2025, popular right-wing propaganda outlet PragerU published their first ever novel, The Tip-Off, The Chronicles of Jonathan Spencer, Book 1. This book is terrible. I have no idea why PragerU decided to branch into middle grade fiction. I have no idea who actually wrote this book, if it was even a person at all, and I have no idea why it's about basketball, of all things. But what I do know is that when I was trying to figure out what the deal is with this book, I ended up stumbling across something else. Something huge that connects together all of the stuff that I've said about PragerU over the past few years. I've talked before about PragerU's adoption at the state level, but now PragerU has gone federal. And this awful little kid's book is the only reason I found out about it. So I'll explain more about where I ended up later on, but for now, let's start at the beginning. Because this book perfectly represents everything that's wrong with PragerU. Let's get to it. The Tip-Off is not a good book. Before we get started, no, I don't know why it's about basketball. And also, no, I don't know anything about basketball, so things are already off to a rocky start. But anyway, The Tip-Off, The Chronicles of Jonathan Spencer, Book 1, follows 6th grader Jonathan Spencer, a freakishly tall 12-year-old whose family just moved from their tiny town of Prosper Valley, Oklahoma, to the bustling suburbs of Oklahoma City. The story, if you can call it that, brings us along with Jonathan as he deals with the trials of middle school. He's got the struggles of being the new kid and being a country boy in the big city, on top of all of the usual middle school struggles like bullies, moody classmates, social media, and parents who just don't understand. But the problem is that this book doesn't really have a plot. So most novels follow a simple 3-act structure. Act 1 has the inciting incident and the start of the action, then something changes and we get to a new situation in Act 2 where the stakes are higher and there are twists and turns and the characters reach their lowest point before the characters learn something new and grow and have character development, allowing them to reach the climax in Act 3 and tie up the ending with a nice resolution. But The Tip-Off doesn't really have that. There's an inciting incident with Jonathan having to go to this new school and all of the stuff that entails, but then the plot just kind of rambles on for the next 100 pages. Seriously, for the first 100 pages of this book, nothing happens. I mean, like, things happen, but there isn't any character growth or new information or unique situations for the main character to deal with. It's just, go to school, have an awkward interaction with your peers, come home, have a frustrating interaction with your siblings or parents, complain that no one understands how hard of a time you're having, repeat. For 100 pages. What I would consider to be his low point is when Jonathan breaks his foot by dropping a toolbox on it in a fit of anger with his dad. But this low point doesn't come near the end of Act 2 like in most stories. Instead, it happens in the middle of the book. Literally the exact middle. He breaks his foot on page 109, and then the story ends on page 218. But even then, nothing really changes. His broken foot just makes him a little more angsty until, in the last 30 pages of the book, he has a couple conversations with his older male role models, TM, that give him the insight needed to finally stand up to his bully, and then that's it. Someone needs to tell PragerU that a novel isn't just a series of things happening. Those things need to be connected into an overarching structure. Things in books are supposed to happen for reasons. That's the thing with this book. It feels like it was written by someone who has never actually read a book and has only had books described to them. It's like those medieval drawings of exotic animals that the artist had obviously never seen before. It's the LaCroix of middle grade fiction. For instance, there are a lot of amateurish oversights that you probably wouldn't expect to see in a professionally written book, like repeating sentences almost verbatim. At one point, Jonathan says, "Maybe being distant is a Spencer family trait." And then just 24 pages later says, "Maybe not spending time with your kids runs in the Spencer family." They also never tell us exactly how tall he is, which you'd think they would because it's like his most important character trait other than being clumsy, but they don't. And in fact, after the first half or so of the book, his height really isn't brought up again. That is something that an editor would definitely have caught. And even though the book is about basketball, It's never really made clear how much Jonathan actually likes the sport. He says on page 3 that ever since his big growth spurt, everyone I know has said I need to play one sport, basketball, which sort of implies that basketball is what other people want for him, not what he wants. But then on page 6, he talks about shooting hoops over the weekend, and on page 10, he says he has an Oklahoma Thunder t-shirt on, and in later chapters, he mentions the Thunder poster he has up in his bedroom and the Thunder ball cap that he sometimes wears. So maybe he does like basketball? But then later, when his coach asks him to take notes on a Thunder game, he acts like this is the first time that he's ever actually paid attention to a basketball game. He says watching the game makes him finally realize why everyone at school wears the jersey of the star player. And then he says, I can't believe I've never sat down and watched them play before. Like, really watched. These guys move like superhumans. It's incredible. I've always liked basketball, but watching these guys play, something's different. So is he a fan of them or not? I still don't know. But I do know that novels are supposed to have clear and consistent characterization, especially when they're written for kids. There are also spacing mistakes on a few pages and some inconsistencies with how dialogue is formatted. Like, internal monologue is usually in italics, but not always for some reason. And there's at least one instance of dialogue being in italics, so unless Jonathan can read people's minds, I think that that's probably just a formatting mistake. The whole thing just feels so lazy. In fact, I have a hunch that this book was written using AI. Now, I can't confirm that, but given the zealous use of AI in other PragerU projects, and the fact that this book doesn't have an author listed anywhere in it, I wouldn't be surprised. When I was reading the book, I kept noticing that some things were phrased in a way that just didn't sound like something a human being would ever say. Let me rattle off a list of my favorites for you. I'm like a living energy drink commercial without caffeine. It's like a playlist on repeat, but there's no pause button. My foot, swollen and bloody, looks like a deflated basketball that's been attacked by a shark and feels about as good as having shoes made of millions of little pushpins. Suddenly, it's like my bones are made of metal and the court is a giant magnet pulling at me. Basketball is the mothership, and I want to beam up. The thought makes me feel warm, like my insides are made of waffles. And on page 14, Jonathan refers to his nose as the North Star. Now, this could just be like some Oklahoma slang that I'm not familiar with. I tried looking it up, but I couldn't find anything. So if any of my viewers are from Oklahoma and know how Oklahomans speak, let me know, because I just want to know if this is normal. Again, it's like it was written by someone who knows what metaphors are, but has no context for what makes them actually work. And on top of those uncanny metaphors, there was also an endless amount of cliches and lazy, uninspired dialogue, like, welp, that happened, and you're an accident waiting to happen, and I let out the breath I didn't realize I was holding. Also, the bully that Jonathan has to deal with is named Trey, but people refer to him by his TikTok handle, Slammo, where his catchphrase is, "You've been Slammo-slammed," because he slams people into lockers. Incredible book, 10 out of 10, perfect, I love it. No notes. Between the way the bully acts and Jonathan's description of different cliques, I think whoever wrote this book hasn't stepped foot near a middle school in decades. This just isn't how humans actually act. It's how lazy writers like to pretend humans act, because it's a hell of a lot easier than trying to capture the nuance of real human relationships. This whole story is just a collection of stereotypes and cliches and tropes. And it's not all bad. There are a couple of highlights, like near the end when he has to write an essay for his coach and he talks about his family and how they work together. I actually found it really touching. And at one point he's having one of his moody tween arguments with his mom, and he thinks, she's right. I know she's right. She knows she's right, but I just don't have the words. I'm fine, Mom, he says. I actually love this. This is exactly how it feels to be a teenager, getting into an argument with your parents when you're upset, but you also know that you're just in a bad mood, and you feel conflicted but can't bring yourself to actually open up about how you're feeling. This is great. There are also some fun puns that I really liked, as well as some accidentally clever similes mixed into the uncanny ones, like when Jonathan describes a hospital pillow as the crispy kind of cool. But overall, the writing is just... This isn't the worst thing I've ever read. What it is nothing. It's vapid. It doesn't really say anything, and what it does say, it doesn't say well. Even if this book wasn't written using AI, it sounds like it was, and functionally I don't think that distinction matters. The end result is the same. It's a trite story with no real structure, filled with boring characters and endless cliches and awkward metaphors. It's just content, and kids deserve better. It's not the first time that I've said this about a PragerU product. This is exactly what I said about their lesson plans, too. They're not offensively terrible or anything, but they're a long way from good. They're just fine. And honestly, being fine is almost worse than being bad, because when something is bad, people know to stay away from it. But when something is just fine, it's a lot easier to get it into schools or libraries or other institutions. But this is just more evidence that PragerU doesn't care about kids. They don't care about teachers. They don't care about art. They don't care about anything. You want to know how little they care? They just straight up lie about their content and assume that their audience won't notice. They claim that this book is 250 pages. It's not. It's 219 pages, which isn't even close. And in the marketing copy for this book, they also say that there are discussion questions at the end of every chapter. There aren't. There are questions at the end of 4 chapters. 4 out of 37. And everything they make is like this. The art on their ebooks and thumbnails is almost entirely AI generated. And those ebooks themselves are mostly just compilations of scripts of their 5-minute videos that they've slapped together and called an ebook. They don't care. And I know what you might be thinking. Zoe, this doesn't really matter, right? Like, no one is forcing kids to read PragerU's terrible books or making teachers use PragerU's terrible lesson plans. Just ignore it and it'll go away. It is not that big of a deal. But unfortunately, it is that big of a deal, and ignoring it won't make it go away, because PragerU might not be forced into every single public school yet, but their work isn't just on YouTube anymore. They've broken containment. PragerU has made it to the White House. On June 16, 2025, the White House published their Founders Museum webpage as part of the America 250 celebration leading up to the country's big birthday next July. At the end of every piece of media in the museum, whether it's document or video, there's the same blurb of text. The White House is grateful for the partnership with PragerU and the U.S. Department of Education in the production of this museum. I didn't actually know about this right away. Believe it or not, I don't spend my free time browsing the White House website. I learned about this from PragerU themselves while I was on their site doing some digging about the tip-off. I was looking for more information about the book because for the first week or so after it was published, they hadn't really said much about it. There were no videos or anything, which I thought was kind of odd. So I was glancing around the site and ended up on PragerU's America 250 page. This page has 2 items, an Independence Day ceremony and the Road to Liberty. Now, that title isn't very descriptive, so I checked out the flavor text beside it, and... So when you go to the America 250 page on the White House website, and then scroll all the way down, you'll find PragerU's work, the Founders Museum. Hi, Editing Zoe here to say that as I was recording B-roll for this video, I learned that it's not just on the White House website, it's also in the White House, or at least in a building on the White House campus. They had an actual event with Education Secretary Linda McMahon, and Marissa Straight was there. They're there in the White House marketing PragerU. This is a real physical location that you can go to and see PragerU stuff. So just keep in mind that all of the things that I am about to describe to you are not just things on their website, they are things that the federal government decided should be put up in a federal building in real life. Just keep that in mind. So anyway, back to the video. The main attraction of the museum is a bunch of little profiles of founding fathers and ladies of the Revolution, and they are terrible. PragerU used AI to turn these paintings of famous revolutionary figures into uncanny valley nightmare creatures who tell us all about their lives and the struggles they faced to help free our country from the British, in voices that also sound like they could be AI generated, but I don't have a very good ear for that sort of thing, so tell me what you think.
I am Betsy Ross, an upholsterer, a widow, a patriot, and, as the story goes, the woman who stitched the first American flag.
My name is Francis Lewis, merchant, delegate from New York, and signer of the Declaration of Independence. I gave everything to the cause, and I would do it again. Was born in Wales and educated in England. But America was my dream.
The museum also has a history brochure, which essentially just functions as a PragerU ad. It has some basic information about the signers of the Declaration of Independence, but there's also a big red box taking up a not insignificant portion of the pamphlet that tells you how PragerU is the most influential media organization in the world that promotes the American values of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness through free educational content for all ages. PragerU is proud to work with the Department of Education to offer this exhibit to the American people in celebration of the 250th anniversary of the founding of the United States. You can explore all of our pro-American content at prageru.com/America250. And that link takes you back to the PragerU site, where you can then check out their other America 250 offering, the Independence Day Ceremony, which you can read about in a 130-page PDF. At least it's free, which is more than I can say about their Newbery nominee over here. Worst $10 I've ever spent. Anyway. The first several pages of the PDF cover the ceremony itself, but I'm going to put a pin in that and come back to it in a minute because at first, I honestly didn't really care. I was way more interested in whatever else was taking up the 100 extra pages. The first thing I did when I was looking at this document was scroll all the way down to the bottom, where we can find a little back of the book blurb, and then just above that, this book is also an official part of the White House's 250 celebration. It's just supplementary material, sure, but it is still created in partnership between PragerU, the White House, and the Department of Education. Now might be a good time to mention that officially, legally speaking, all of the third-party material on the White House page isn't technically being endorsed by the government. So even though everything on the America 250 page is made by PragerU in Hillsdale, we shouldn't take that to mean that the White House stands behind every single thing PragerU and Hillsdale do and say. But even if it's not technically endorsement in the legal sense, it still kind of feels that way to the public, doesn't it? Like, if PragerU is on the White House website, even if they're not being formally endorsed, it still sends us the message that PragerU is a legitimate and trustworthy organization whose work we should take seriously, right? Let's just keep that in mind as we go. So, what is in this book? Well, after the ceremony, they have some historical founding documents, the Declaration of Independence, the Pledge of Allegiance, and the National Anthem, and then there's some summaries of important events that led up to the Revolutionary War, including, in their words, "Join or die, America's first meme. Thanks, I hate it." After that comes some summaries of the major battles of the war, followed by the section that takes up the vast majority of the book, biographies of every single signer of the Declaration of Independence. This section spans almost 70 pages, over half of the entire book. And then it's followed by biographies of the women of the Revolution, who get a total of 6 pages. But then, finally, we get 25 pages of fun family activities, and genuinely, I love this section. There's a quiz, which I don't care about, but after that, you get to create your revolutionary persona. Finally, a Revolutionary War-themed TTRPG! Or at least the character creator, for one. You start by choosing which colony you're from, and then you pick a portrait, which, let me just say, if anyone other than PragerU had put this out, PragerU would have torn it apart as being woke and DEI and not historically accurate. Then you can pick the motto your character lives by from their predetermined list of Revolutionary era memes, along with what country your family is from. And then comes the fun stuff. You can pick your background, basically whatever you did before the revolution, and 3 revolutionary characteristics. Are you the brave one, the clever one, the loyal one, the bold one, the quiet strength, the voice of reason, the fire starter, or the guardian? And then you decide which famous founding friend you met during your revolutionary journey, and I don't know why they didn't just say founding father, because all of the people you can choose from are men. And also, for people who get so upset about the concept of the term birthing person, famous founding friend? Why do you need to be gender neutral? I'm so... I have so many feelings about this, and none of them are good. You can also choose which epic event you participated in, and what history remembers you for today. I love this. I would have eaten this up as a kid. But there is just one problem. So when you're doing a roleplay activity, you're stuck with the roles that the activity allows you to choose from. And PragerU doesn't give you many choices. Basically, you can fight for freedom on the battlefield, or push for independence in the Continental Congress, or be a woman. That's it. They have the facade of depth, where you're given all of these different backgrounds and traits, but if they all end up at the same place, being a soldier or part of Congress or a woman, then what's the point? Why allow us to be the guardian, where you protect your community, your friends, and the dream of freedom, but not give us a role that actually uses those characteristics, like an abolitionist or a church leader? Why allow us to be clever, outsmarting the enemy with secret codes and daring plans, or have quiet strength working behind the scenes, steady and dependable, but not let us be a printer working with Ben Franklin or a writer working with Thomas Paine? Something else that is conspicuously missing is that even though they have Black portraits available for you to choose from, none of the other illustrations in this section show any Black people at all. And notably, even though you can be a Black character and have your character's family be from Africa, and even though Phyllis Wheatley is one of the women they highlight earlier in this book, there is no mention of slavery anywhere in this part. For PragerU, the only history worth imagining is the sanitized patriotic archetypes of brave revolutionary soldiers and wise founding fathers. Nothing else matters. It's like they're genuinely afraid of any version of history that has complex, nuanced roles, or that could be challenging or painful in any way. Just like the tip-off book gives us flattened depictions of human relationships and language, this book gives us flattened history. And this flattening happens in everything PragerU makes. Everything they produce is made to be easy to consume, not to be thought-provoking. It's comforting, not challenging. It's smoothed out, wrinkle-free sludge. And nowhere is this more evident than in the Independence Day ceremony at the start of this book. Now, the ceremony itself isn't actually new. There's a video of PragerU personalities actually doing the ceremony with a bunch of kids in 2022, but this book, where they walk through the steps and give you a script and explain what it all means, just came out this year. And whoo boy! In their words, this ceremony is designed to remind us how fortunate we are to be Americans, and to teach children to celebrate the birth of our exceptional country, and reinforce the ideals our founding fathers honored for our United States of America. Now, this is already some weird level of patriotism, but they take it a step further by loudly and proudly declaring that this ceremony is modeled after the Jewish Passover Seder. PragerU has literally turned the 4th of July into a religious holiday with, as we'll see shortly, all the trappings of a religious holiday in a book that was created in partnership with the federal government. Hi, Editing Zoe again. I just wanted to mention that in the marketing email that I brought up earlier in the video, it says that part of the event that they held at the White House also included Marissa Streit leading this Independence Day ceremony for the children in attendance. They actually did this Passover Seder inspired, patriotic, religious 4th of July thing in the White House at this event. So this is not some niche thing. This is an official part of the museum that got the go-ahead from the federal government.
How is that propaganda? How is it propaganda?
I genuinely don't even know what to say at this point. My friend Zilla, who was a huge help for this part because I didn't know anything about the traditional Seder ceremony before she gave me a crash course, so shout out to Zilla, go check out her stuff, linked in the description. She's great, love her, but she called this rancid and Christo-fascist. Amazing. So, the Passover Seder is a ceremony of remembrance of the Exodus story, where the Jewish people escaped slavery in Egypt. But anyone who knows the story of Passover knows that it was a dark, uncomfortable, challenging time for everyone involved. And the Seder ceremony reflects that. The foods are dry matzah crackers and vegetables dipped in salt water and spicy horseradish, and there's time dedicated to thinking about the Egyptians who suffered during the plagues. The whole thing is supposed to challenge you. Then, on the other hand, you have PragerU's version. Instead of foods that are meant to represent sacrifice and challenge, PragerU's table includes iced tea, salted pretzels, and strawberries and blueberries dipped in whipped cream. Like, it would be funny if it weren't so offensive. All of these foods are tasty and easy to eat. They don't represent difficult parts of our history, they represent proud, patriotic moments. The only thing that could be considered negative is the salted pretzel that represents the salty tears and suffering of the soldiers at Valley Forge. But like, how are we supposed to empathize with suffering when it's so tasty?
Pretzels! Now, pretzels remember the suffering of the salty tears of soldiers during the harsh winter at Valley Forge. Everybody take a bite. See the salt? The salty tears of the soldiers. That's what we gotta remember. And another sip of the tea.
Gotta wash down the salt.
You got it.
Every single thing that PragerU makes takes something that's actually complex and nuanced and difficult to grapple with, whether it's education, or art, or relationships, or history, and they flatten it down until it's easy to swallow. As soon as something is challenging, as soon as something requires any amount of critical thought, it's a threat. Honestly, it's no wonder they love AI so much. AI-generated content is, by definition, safe and flat and easy, so of course it shows up all over the place in PragerU's stuff. I mentioned how the tip-off is probably AI and the videos about the Founding Fathers are all done using AI, but a lot of the text in this Independence Day ceremony book reads as AI-generated too. Like, in a section about why the colonists fought, there's a lot of the usual AI hallmarks, like the "it's not X, it's Y" structure. The American Revolution wasn't sparked by a single event, it was the result of more than a decade of rising tension. And the colonists objected not to taxes themselves, but to taxation without representation. And the colonists fought not because they hated Britain, but because they believed liberty was worth the risk of war. As those last two sentences show, there's also quite an overuse of the em-dash, which is another telltale sign that this wasn't written by a human. They also love the rule of three. In a section about who the signers were, what they risked, and why it mattered, they say that the signers risked their reputations, their fortunes, and their very lives, and then describe them as patriots, founders, Americans. And honestly, it just has the AI vibe. Like, listen to this. Whether you're a history lover, a parent seeking to instill deeper meaning in the holiday, or a proud American eager to honor our roots, this book offers a new way to celebrate. It transforms the 4th of July from a day of entertainment into a moment of education, connection, and patriotic gratitude. Let us celebrate not just with fireworks, but with purpose. That is the most AI-sounding thing I have ever read in my entire life. And if you want to learn more about how to spot AI writing, I recommend this video from Evan Edinger, which I have linked in the description. When I was watching it the first time, I was like, doing the Leonardo DiCaprio meme, where I was just like, yes, thank you, like pointing at the screen, like, oh, finally, someone is putting this into words. But it's just like I said about the novel. Even if it isn't actually AI, it sure sounds like it. And at the end of the day, I don't think that distinction matters. It's clear that they don't care about art. They don't care about history. They don't care about anything that isn't flattened beyond any discernible meaning. PragerU isn't just uncurious, they're anti-curiosity. Their history is simplistic and afraid of conflict. Their art has no meaning or care put into it, and everything they make betrays just how little of a shit they give about the people who consume their content. And now that they're being platformed by the White House, that includes everyone. One of the biggest issues with what PragerU is doing here is that they're not alone. This kind of hollow history is showing up all over the place as institutions across the country flatten history down to be as easy and comfy as possible. National parks are being forced to cover up any history that could be considered disparaging of the country, and park goers are asked to report any negative coverage of historical figures or events. In Oklahoma, history teachers are going to have to start covering the discrepancies in 2020 elections results. History education is being reshaped in the image of PragerU. It can't ask us challenging questions or make us confront uncomfortable truths about the world and our place in it. History has to be simple and comfortable, or else it's wrong. And that idea is something I want to explore in more depth in my next video, because there is a long and storied record of societies turning history into oversimplified narratives of good and evil. What these institutions are doing, especially PragerU and its overt religious rework of Independence Day, is turning history into a myth. But even worse, they're turning it into an empty myth. History education is being hollowed out at every turn. Instead of nuance and complexity, we're getting censorship and lies. So, listen, I know that we're all tired of PragerU. People like me have been talking about them for years, but I think it's important to keep talking about them because they're not going away. In fact, they're just getting bigger, more legitimate, more powerful. PragerU's content might be slop, but it's slop that is shaping the future of our country. Thank you for sticking around until the end of the video. I hope that you liked it, and if you did, then be sure to like and comment and subscribe and do all those YouTube things. You know what to do. You've been here before. I know that this video just sort of scratches the surface of a lot of these like deeper issues, but I have a lot more to say about the way that fascists flatten history into like easy, tightly packaged narratives. So if you want to catch that video when it comes out, then be sure that you're subscribed. Make sure you go do that. I also want to give a huge thanks to my patrons and members whose names are scrolling by over here, with an especially huge thanks to Hugh Sophia, Justin Lowry, Megan Lowndes, Ryan Boren, and Shep Alderson. I truly would not be able to do this without my patrons supporting me, so if you want to help me continue to do what I do, then consider checking out patreon.com/Zoe_B, where you can get early and ad-free access to my videos, as well as having the opportunity to get an end-of-video poem written for you. Speaking of, it is that time, so without further ado, for Sylvie, here is On Sweetness. You were hungry when you found them, wild strawberries just there beneath the oak tree. It wasn't until you'd already eaten enough to stain your fingers all sticky and pink that you realized how readily their wet flesh had yielded under your pulp-covered tongue. It was then that you learned just how sweet rot can taste at first. And until next time, stay safe, stay warm, and I'll see y'all again soon, I hope. Bye, folks. So something that I think is important to mention is that this book came out on June 11th, and it's all about basketball, and it takes place in Oklahoma, and the main character is, or maybe is not, it's hard to say, a fan of the Oklahoma Thunder. And that's like a big deal. Like, I didn't even know that the Oklahoma Thunder existed, because again, I don't know basketball things. And then on June, I think it was 20th or 22nd, June 22nd, the Oklahoma Thunder won the like NBA thing, whatever the like, you know, the big NBA, they won the NBA. I'm not saying that PragerU like made it happen so that they could sell this book, but I'm not saying that. I'm just asking questions, you know? I think it's important to be critical consumers of media, and, you know, is it a coincidence? Could be. But I don't think he knows what he's doing. He's doing his best. We should all strive to do our best.
Facts are stubborn things, and whatever may be our wishes or inclinations, they cannot alter the state of facts. In other words, friend, facts do not care about our feelings.
How is that propaganda? How is it propaganda? Pretzels. See the salt? The salty tears of the soldiers. That's what we gotta remember. Pretzels. And another sip of the tea.
Gotta wash down the salt.
Pretzels.